Right? Corporations were announcing extra dividends again. Did you hear? The worst was over, wasn't it? Wasn't it? As if to prove it was, we went right out and bought something, and went right on proving depression is always part manic.
I push the middle valve down. The music goes down around below, below, below. Dealio, listen to the jazz come out. I push the other valve down. The music goes round and around. Whoa, and it comes out here. When the music goes round and round and round.
It comes out here, too. These are Americans. If the democratic ideal and the democratic New Deal had failed them, at least they now...
Poverty, denying work and productiveness to many other millions. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished.
Franklin Roosevelt had promised that in America nobody would starve to death. He was wrong. Yet the poor claimed they didn't blame the president. They said he meant right. Maybe he did, but the Congress wasn't as cooperative as it had been, and the New Deal was about to be dealt out. Alphabet soup. The federal government, through programs like the WPA, Works Progress Administration, had given people jobs when private enterprise could not, but the government had gone deep in debt trying to run the country and remodel it at the same time. But oh my, what a New Deal the New Deal had been for art in America. John Houseman ran the Harlem branch of the Federal Theater Project.
The New Deal was very sensitive. It's not fashionable now, I know, but the fact is that there was a humanity and there was a decency and there was a sort of creative courage there, which was quite extraordinary.
Jobs for the artists, art for the masses. About 30 million Americans saw productions by the Federal Theater for next to nothing.
The Federal Theater was aimed at a broad-based, non-opulent audience. The fact that the tickets were that cheap simply brought people into the theater, particularly at the time when there was no money around anyway.
In the Federal Writers Project was a young actor named Studs Terkel.
Many communities, people in small towns saw flesh and blood actors in classics for the first time in their lives. It enriched their lives. When you think of that period, you think of something terribly exciting in the midst of adversity. It was a moment of contradiction, paradox, one of great despair and of exhilaration at the same time.
There was despair in the faces of the desperate. There was exhilaration in revealing that despair to comfortable America. A job for the photographers of the Farm Security Administration. One of them was Carl Maidans.
I came to the FSA late in the Depression years. The greatest depression in the history of the country. It was a very exciting prospect. Imagine, if you will, yourself being sent out to see America and to photograph anything you think you want to photograph. That was our assignment.
The FSA photographers showed us that there, but for the grace of God and good birth, stood we all.
It is an intimate picture of America, and all the photographers who made pictures for the Farm Security Administration became notable names among American photographers. The Dorothea Langs, the Arthur Rothsteins, the Russell Lees, the Walker Evans.
Most Americans experienced poverty secondhand, filtered through the sensitivities of photographers, actors, artists, writers. The White House had a direct pipeline, about 3,000 letters every day, angry, hopeful, despondent letters were written to President and Mrs. Roosevelt.
Dear friend and lady of the White House, we have always tried to get by without help, but we can't feed our family and clothe them.
To our president, what we men want is work. We're not asking for anything but what we're entitled to. President Roosevelt, we are poor people, but we are human. We wish to be treated that way.
I am a girl of 18 years old. If I won't get any help from you, dear Mr. President, then I'll take my life away. I can't stand it no longer. We were thrown out on the street a few times. I hate the way I'm living now.
We are in a land of plenty, but I see a good many of us are starving. I'm now at the point of desperation. All I want is a chance. It's my last hope and effort. All else has failed.
Sometimes when you had no job or a bad job, you just shouldered what you could and moved on. Carl Maidans captured such a couple forever.
I was in a car, and I saw them in a distance coming down the road. And in those years when you saw two people walking down the road carrying what little they had, you knew that they were in trouble. They said that the plantation owners in that area paid cheap wages, too cheap for them, and they were on their way hoping to find another plantation where they could earn more money.
Thanks to these pictures, the one-third of America that was ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished had become inescapable.
We must make a record of what you see in happenings, in things, and in people, so that they will be distinguished, so that people who look at them will know what they are. And you must think of history when you're making these pictures. These pictures are going to last forever. They are going to be America's record of what was happening in America in these years.
If photographs could be socially meaningful, and they could, naturally writers were going to prove no picture could ever be worth 1,000 words. And some writers came close. The rest generally confused serious with important. What sold best? Well, as always, a little reality went a long way. In fiction, Gone with the Wind. In nonfiction, How to Win Friends and Influence People. In general, motors. And in my trade, that's called a tease. Come back to 1937. There's more to that story, even pictures.
Our world will continue in a moment with Long Winter, Short Spring, 1937.
Tums is one antacid that can really handle heartburn. It's a lot stronger than the #2 brand.
That's one good reason we use Tums. And Tums happens to be rich in calcium.
That's the second good reason.
Dinner? You're in New York. I'm in Paris.
Ever hear of the airplane?
Nothing less than finesse.
Tonight, your hair has to look its best, and it will. You use Finesse.
May I suggest the coq au vin?
Finesse Conditioner. The perfect conditioning whether your hair needs a little or a lot.
When I go on vacation, I leave the entertainment to Ricardo, the cooking to Francois, and the picture-taking to Minolta.
Introducing Minolta Freedom Dual, a touch of the button for group shots, and telephoto, too.
I leave it all to my Freedom Dual.
It's autofocus with 2 built-in lenses. Your check?
You can leave that to my husband.
Minolta Freedom Cameras, for great pictures.
You know who to leave it to.
Only the mind of Minolta.
Here's your coffee, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Were you ever a dancer?
Me? No.
I'll bet you took some lessons.
Actually, I did when I was a kid, and I loved them, but...
What?
Well, I'll tell you, these feet are meant for working.
Well, you make it look like dancing in the aisles.
It must be my Kinney shoes, then.
Whatever you say.
It's been wonderful talking to you.
Need another tempting reason to spread Philadelphia brand cream cheese? Ounce for ounce, Philly's got half the calories of butter or margarine.
Start spreading the news. Friday, Webster's birthday is full of surprises.
The ticket?
Then George hits the big time.
Ta-da! I gotta go upstairs, loosen up the old pipes.
Would you like some Drano? Mr. Belvedere. Tomorrow.
My kind of town.
Welcome back to the long winter and short spring of 1937. An automobile is not made like a watch or a chocolate cake. One person or a few people nursing it along from design to completion. A car is made by hundreds of people doing one small job over and over again as the various parts come down the line. to be made into a car by hundreds of other people at some other assembly line, doing one little job over and over and over. It's not fun, but it used to be a lot worse before the winter of '37 in Flint, Michigan.
At General Motors, things look pretty good now, and you know what they say. What's good for General Motors is good for the USA and the DuPont family and the other stockholders and the management and just about everybody except maybe the folks putting the cars together. So what? Chevys are more popular than unions. If Mary Nightingale wants to keep on sewing seat cushions, she better get that through her head.
We were sitting around on a truck eating our lunch, and I just happened to say to some of the men, they were complaining about the working conditions, and I said, what you need in here is a good union. And one man said to me, he says, lady, he said, you talk union in here, you go out on your ear.
Which may explain why only 1 in about every 400 workers for GM in Flint belongs to the UAW. Workers need work, even if it's seasonal, with few benefits and plenty of risk. It's one thing knowing you aren't going to die rich. It's another suspecting you aren't going to die old. Ken Malone, 8 years on the job so far.
No way could I have survived under the conditions I was working under. Absolutely impossible. We work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The company doesn't seem to care, and so far the union can't seem to make the company care. What can the workers do? Nothing. That's what. And so on December 30th, 1936, that's what the workers do. At 2 different GM plants in Flint, they sit down and do nothing. Stephen Richvalsky, 19 years old, one of the youngest workers to sit down.
Well, when we pulled that caper on December 30th, we came back in the plant. We shut that plant down. Hey, look, we were skating on thin ice. But management didn't know this. By sitting in the plant, we prevented any production from occurring. There was no way management could bring in outside people because we were in there to prevent that.
What they can't prevent is GM asking for a court order to evict them from GM property. Anybody from Flint knows that, even a Democratic congressman like Andrew Transu.
The sit-down strike was illegal because it is unlawful for a person to take possession of your property and to convert it to their own use and to exclude you from it.
That's what the court says, too. GM owns GM, but then the workers discover the judge owns GM, too. About $200,000 worth, which beats a court order any day.
They used every legal document that was available to them to get us out of there, but then, of course, it was force against force, and we weren't about to go out of there.
A sit-down has shut down a giant. Inside, workers will exercise and go on living in the place in which they exercised their will to not go on working. Roscoe Rich, sitting down with spirits up.
I wasn't much to let my spirits get very low. We had something to keep us going. We had games we played. We enjoyed ourselves while we was in there.
We had a couple, 3 musicians in there. They came in there. They were in, but they had the guitars brought in.
Confidence today, consequences tomorrow.
Now when the speed up comes, you just twiddle your thumbs and sit down, sit down. And when you want them to know that, they better go slow, sit down, sit down, sit down, take a seat, sit down and rest your feet, sit down, you've got them beat, sit down, sit down.
Feeding the strikers takes 500 pounds of meat, 300 loaves of bread, and 100 pounds of potatoes every day. On January 11th, company police try to cut the lifeline, starve the strikers out. Striker Fred Ahern was there when the battle was drawn.
Our existence was on the line because it was our jobs, it was our family. Everything from that point on becomes kind of wild because everyone was fighting everybody else. We tipped over cars and tore them apart with our bare hands, and if you ever see men tear something apart with their bare hands, it's one of the most frightening things you ever see in your life.
One of the field generals for the strikers was union official Victor Reuther.
I happened to be on the scene, sitting in the sound truck, when the attack came. They began lobbing shells and firing rifles. And the strikers resisting, not only in the picket line, but those inside.
From the windows, the strikers pelt the cops with whatever comes to hand. Union newspaperman Henry Krause is arrested.
And at this point, the police turned around and drew their guns and shot. Wounded 16 workers, 2 of them that we thought were going to die.
On the morning of January 12th, the all-night battle is over. Nobody died. 2,000 National Guardsmen are ordered into Flint by the new governor, Frank Murphy, who has been in office only 10 days. The strikers fear, and the company hopes, that the National Guard will clear the plants. But Murphy has ordered them to roust nobody, just keep the peace. Now, the Flint Alliance, a loose-knit organization of anti-union groups, holds a rally against the strike. Vigilante violence increases. 4 union organizers are beaten, their car driven off the road. One result, hundreds of strikers who have been reluctant to join the union sign up. And women leave their homes for the front lines. Dorothy Krause was one of their leaders.
Now, I'll never forget the first time we did that. A man came, one of the strikers, opened a window, and he yelled out, "That's my wife there. She's picketing. Look at her." You know, he had never thought in his life that something like that would happen to his wife.
Still no paychecks, only bitter cold. After 3 weeks, GM has not been shut down, and the sit-downers have only a standoff.
Most of the people got, you know, because the anxiety, the duration of the strike, we're getting tired of this. But us younger fellas that knew we were going to be fired if the strike wasn't successful. We had no second thoughts.
The union has a plan. If it can take over GM's most heavily guarded facility, Chevrolet assembly plants all over the country will have to shut down. As a diversion, the workers sit down at a different plant, and the company police go for the bait.
We had much more and shut the doors when the police were shooting tear gas through them. They blowed the door, blowed the glass out first, then blowed the tear gas in, and it was raising heck that way.
After the gassing, the women rush to the aid of the men.
They're gassing them, they're choking them, so all of us went to the plant, and every one of the windows was broken.
The company wins a Pyrrhic victory. It clears out that plant, but the union's real target has been left lightly defended. And by late afternoon that day, February 1st, the 3,000 workers at the key plant have occupied it and shut it down. General Motors is wounded and bleeding money. But now the strikers are told to get out within 24 hours. GM's boss, William Knudsen, has obtained a court order. Will the strikers leave? On February 2nd, they send Governor Murphy a telegram. They'll die first.
The day of settling labor disputes by force and violence, I hope, has gone forever in our country. We want the rule of reason to survive.
8 days after Murphy's speech, the rule of reason survives. On the 44th day of the strike, Knudsen signs an agreement recognizing the United Auto Workers Union. The longest sit-down strike in American history has ended. A new outlook on life for American labor has begun.
I could hardly believe it, you know, that we brought General Motors to their knees, you know, a giant corporation like that.
I never had anything till we got our union. And when we got the union in, and we got a living wage, well, I could manage fine.
Today, we can sit back, we can retire with dignity.
And if the boss is in the way, we're gonna roll over him. We're gonna roll right over him. We're gonna roll right over him. Well, if the boss is in the way, we're gonna roll right over him. We're gonna roll the union.
Well, the unions sure did roll, bringing dignity and an adequate paycheck to more and more millions of American working men and women. for about 20 years. Then along about 1956, the number of white collars in the workforce surpassed the blue collars. Now these accoutrements of the laboring man look almost like relics. You don't need them to work in a boutique or a Burger King. Dignity, adequate paycheck, well, you can still take that up with your union, if you have one. Right now, come back to Our World and Radio Days.
Things come back to stores. Things come back to Sears.
Oh, I think you wanted that one. And it's a beautiful bottle.
But if you ever decide to return something to Sears, you don't have to give us a lengthy explanation.
Oh, I understand. Oh, don't worry. We'll take care of it.
All you have to say is, you're not satisfied. In some cases, you don't even have to say that.
Sonny, this is tough.
Granny, this is tougher. Sunlight. It cuts tough, baked-on, caked-on food. Even grease.
Ooh, thanks a lot, Sonny.
Sunlight with lemon juice. It cuts the tough stuff loose.
Feel fresh all day with Shield deodorant soap. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, fresh. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, fresh. Gonna feel fresh the whole day through with Shield. Fresh all day with Shield.
Taster's Choice, the image of gourmet store coffee. Only Taster's Choice uses this superior blend of the very same coffee beans found in gourmet stores, Arabica beans, the world's costliest and most flavorful. Gourmet store coffee and Taster's Choice, a remarkable resemblance. Enjoy the richness, aroma, and flavor. Regular or naturally decaffeinated, the choice for taste is Taster's Choice.
Marie, the dawn is breaking. Marie.
Our World will be right back.
Seem to find our hearts are aching, and tears will fall as you recall the moon.
February 9th, 1986, two boxers clashed with one goal to win the WBA World Light Heavyweight Championship. In one corner, Marvin Johnson, former champ, determined to regain the title. His opponent, undefeated Leslie Stewart. When the ring cleared, Johnson left with a crown. Now Stewart looks to avenge his only loss in a live championship rematch. Plus, a day before the big race, a live report on the Indy 500. All on ABC's Wide World of Sports, Saturday.
Something's happening here. It's in the air. It's on the air, too. It started with Ann Holt and Bob Mueller in Nashville's First News at 5. It continues with Fred Graham, network correspondent and native son, back home in Nashville and part of the Channel 2 news team. Now it's Fred Graham and Ann Holt at 10. Hometown people dedicated to Nashville, its past and its future. Something's happening here.
It's Double Mash tonight, starting at 10:30.
Welcome back to the long winter and short spring of 1937. A world depression has changed a world, bringing extremes to the right and to the left, both opponents of the democratic ideal. But America, too, has been altered economically, politically, and permanently. We are more confident than we were 1 year ago. They call that recovery. We may never be as confident as we were 10 years ago. They call that truth, another consequence.
In 1937, Guglielmo Marconi, one of the pioneers of radio, died, not knowing all he had wrought. I went around my dial the other day and got soft rock, hard rock, Mozart, some news fragments, a guy talking to a woman from St. Louis, and another guy talking dirty. I dare say you'd find much the same thing on your radio, maybe Mandrell instead of Mozart. In the winter of 1937, the radio wasn't like that at all.
Hi-ho the radio, radio, radio. Hi-ho the radio. The radio to you.
The makers of Chase and Sanborn Coffee present Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy.
From Hollywood, California, the Hotchkiss Packing Company presents the Marx Brothers.
The makers of Post Toasties, the wake-up food, present Joe E. Brown.
To you who crowd our theater on Hollywood Boulevard tonight, and to you unseen millions the nation over, welcome to the Lux Radio Theater.
In 1937, the best entertainers in America came right into your home live. You couldn't see them, of course. Maybe that was just as well.
Hi-ho the radio, it's time to take a pill.
Your best friend wouldn't tell you.
No, but some announcer will.
The big broadcast of 1937.
If you simply had to see radio stars, you could go to the movies.
The snow was piled up in drifts 10 feet high.
Say, that other fellow was no actor at all.
No.
But he's much better than this fella.
Yeah, quiet. 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 I wonder what would have happened if you'd asked for noise.
Noise?
Noise!
Noise.
Happy New Year.
About 20 million people every week tuned into the Major Bowes Original Amateur Hour. 20 performers were culled from 10,000 applications every week. They got $10 and a free dinner.
Stand by. This is it.
Good evening, friends. Now spins our weekly Wheel of Fortune. Around, around she goes, and where she stops, nobody knows.
Without a soul.
All you needed was a bus ticket and a banjo and a lot of good luck. Wonder what the other 9,980 people sounded like. The Major also employed seasoned veterans to make sure of an entertaining show. Over the radio, you couldn't tell a real amateur from a ringer.
Gentlemen of rank and position, why your nose is covered with rotten liquor and your mouth reeks with bawdy kisses. Vanity and stupidity written all over your face. The only decent thing about you all is your hat.
Eddie Lawrence used a variety of names and voices. He was on the show a lot.
The next week, they'd announce the winners. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Guy goes on, he tap dances on 1 foot over the radio, and he wins. I don't understand that at all.
Major Bowes Amateur Hour. Your vote, please.
The public chose the winner by phoning in votes, sometimes as many as 30,000 in 1 week. Some winners and finalists went on the road in variety shows, booked, of course, by Major Bowes.
If somebody's father belonged to a big club in L.A., everybody would call up 10 times and you'd win. I always came in second or third. I was there when I was 14. I don't mind. It was working. I think we made $100 a week or something on the road, or maybe less.
Time the survey of all the world must have a stop. And alas, the minute hand indicates the stop of our brief togetherness.
With radios and taxi cabs, the driver's life is sweeter because it makes the passenger forget to read the meter.
Radio was there. It was the medium. The mystery shows were great on the radio because you could imagine horrible things.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows.
Great thing was Saturday on the radio. Saturday. Every Saturday they had the orchestra remotes.
Radio sold the sound of this music. Radio sold the records, the record players, and the rhythm. It was a music that spoke of confidence, had a kind of American beat to it, gave you a downright American kind of feeling when you heard it.
What do you call that music?
Well, that's the kind of a swinging music.
And a swinging big band was nothing but a whole bunch of different people all playing the same song at the same time, only different. All you needed to lead a band was talent, and a band, Artie Shaw had both.
The music that we were playing, that bands like mine were playing, the so-called, what they call swing music, which is a misnomer. Swing is a verb. It was jazz, big band jazz, and if it didn't swing, it wasn't jazz. They danced in a very interesting way, and sometimes they danced so well in tempo to what you were doing that they caused a series of vibrations between the dancing and the band, the dancing. It was a feedback situation. It could be pretty remarkable at times. It was a pretty crazy period musically.
That manic energy came from the times as much as from the music, which came from jazz, which came from black America, and didn't always swing. Benny Goodman was one of the first to hire a black to play in a big white band built on black music. Goodman got Lionel Hampton. We got good vibes. What did Hampton get?
I had a chance to advance myself in music and play with top people. Benny Goodman. Harry James was in that band. He played trumpet in the band. Gene Krupa playing drums with him at that time. I've always been asked how you felt when you was playing with a white organization. It was a great joy playing with that famous band. We got top pay. We stayed in top places, and maybe that's the privilege of playing with a white band and playing with a leader that was concerned. Benny Goodman was. He was very concerned about us. He always thought that we got the best, not only economically but socially too. He deserved a lot of credit. People socialized, listened to music, and didn't have no idea of who was black or who was white. They just enjoyed what they was hearing. The music really did. Music was the tool, weapon for integration.
Only if you were tone deaf to what the rest of society was saying, which most band leaders that winter were not, including Artie Shaw.
The difficulties of going around the country with a black person in your band were almost insurmountable. You'd come into a town to play. The band would check into a hotel. The black guy would have to get into a cab and go down to so-called black town and try to find a colored town, Negro town, whatever it was, try to find a place to live. The same thing when we could finish work. We'd go to a restaurant, stop at a little all-night cafe somewhere, and the one black person would go in. They wouldn't feed him or her. And we'd say, all right, we'll leave. That didn't matter. The guy'd say, go ahead. It was a big problem. And it had nothing to do with music. On the bandstand, I'll see that you get equality to anybody else. You'll be equal and even with everybody in the band. I run that little world. Off the bandstand, I have nothing to do with it. I'm not the emperor of the USA. So it was tough.
Democracy, our favorite song, even if we knew the words better than we played the tune. Meanwhile, in another country, another group of people were trying to sing what might be a song of democracy, but many of us here thought it didn't sound right. Or else maybe we didn't hear it at all. You know, when you're listening to swing, it's easy to miss the faint strum of a Spanish guitar. Come back to the long winter and short spring of 1937 and the sound of fascism set to a Latin beat.
Our World will be right back with Long Winter, Short Spring, 1937.
Dear Serts, when Barney told me that the new dispatcher took me off night flights, I couldn't wait to thank him.
Only Serts has fresh flavor and Retsin to keep your breath face-to-face fresh. Serts and sugar-free Serts.
When you're allergy sensitive, your next attack may be only a breath away. For relief, depend on Benadryl. Doctors have prescribed it more than any allergy medication ever. Benadryl from Park Davis.
listening to Children of Japan. This joyous and beautiful sound comes to you from Delta Airlines, because Delta is flying to Tokyo, gateway to the Orient. Come with us to a land steeped in tradition, yet as modern as tomorrow. We'll fly you to the gracious charm of the Far East with all the comfort of the familiar West. Delta to Japan.
When you use the AT&T long-distance network, you can enjoy a relaxing conversation.
Hello, Planet Chaos.
Over the last 3 years, AT&T has lowered prices 30%.
I hear you loud and clear.
Lower prices, another way we're reaching further to bring your world closer.
I'm so glad you called. You're the first Earth person I've talked to all day.
AT&T, the right choice.
On the Disney Sunday movie,
That boy's all I got, Bill.
2 children hunted in a hostile land. A horse was their only hope.
Giant and kill for a horse like that.
Bruce Boxleitner, Jack Elam in Louis L'Amour's classic Down the Long Hills. Sunday.
The second time that some Americans found themselves fighting a civil war was in Spain in the winter of 1937, after the elected government was challenged by the unelected government, the armies of General Franco. Were they freedom fighters or communist dupes, those Americans who went there to fight? And just what were they fighting for over there? Maybe some took along a Spanish dictionary. Spain being so foreign and, well, so different from America and all. Liberty. Libertad. Republic? Republica. Dictator? Dictador. What were they fighting for over there? Wrong question. Right question, what were they fighting? They were fighting fascism before it was popular to do so, or as they say in Spain, popular.
By the winter of 1937, General Franco had been in rebellion against the Republican government for 6 months. He was strengthened by Europe's fascist governments. Italy's Benito Mussolini sent about 45,000 soldiers to fight in Spain. Tanks and artillery as well. And the Führer of Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, furnished Franco with armor, aircraft, and 15,000 men. Joseph Stalin sent arms and communist organizers to the loyalists who held the purse string and held the major cities. But they were a mixed bag of socialists, communists, anarchists, and Republicans, just now putting together a real army. They quarreled among themselves, but they were the only democratically elected left-wing government in Europe that was standing up against fascism. The United States, bound by the Neutrality Act, could not and did not take sides officially. 2/3 of the Americans polled that winter were neutral. The Catholic Church in Rome and the United States favored Franco's fascist rebels. The Spanish government was violently anti-clerical. But Americans who were pro-Republican outnumbered Franco supporters 2-1, and a lot of them were willing to go to Spain to prove it. Abe Asheroff was 21 years old.
It became apparent that Hitler and Mussolini had joined that war on the side of Franco, and that it was no longer a question of a simple civil war between Spaniards. Hitler was the epitome of all the things I've been fighting against all my life. And to become involved in Spain was just another step in the direction which my life had been going.
Americans had raised money for the Republicans, had sent food and medical supplies to Spain. Now they were sending fighters. Milt Wolfe, also 21 years old, was a garment worker.
I was involved in raising money for the Spanish Republicans and sending the stuff there. And so when the opportunity came for Americans to volunteer, I sort of put my ass where my mouth was, and I went.
In all, about 3,000 Americans would go. For no money, no medals, precious little glory. There were nurses and cooks, hardcore communists, romantics, intellectuals, and a lot of tough guys with blue collars. The fighters were the Abraham Lincoln Battalion, and they were in for a long winter. Union organizer Charlie Nusser had left a tannery job in New Jersey.
We drove down to the border in a bus, and the French guards said, "Where are you going?" And we said, "We're going to Spain." And they said, "What for?" And we said, "We're tourists," and everybody laughed, and a few of them gave the salute. And we went over, and the next day the border was closed.
When neutral France and Portugal refused to pass them through, the volunteers had to enter Spain any way they could, which could mean crossing the Pyrenees in the dead of winter. All told, about 40,000 foreigners came to Spain from 25 countries, Slavic-speaking volunteers from Eastern Europe, anti-fascists from Italy, French, Belgians, and the anti-Nazi Germans of the Telman Brigade. And of course, the motley Americans of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion. Bill Wheeler had been a truck driver.
We were pretty loosely organized as far as military discipline and all that sort. See, most of us were rank-and-file trade unions and things of that sort. We didn't take to authority too well in the beginning. No saluting and no spit and polish, no protocol or anything of that sort. They taught us how to march, more or less. We were rather ragged, but we did get some sort of formation. And it worked pretty well.
In February, the Americans were tapped for battle in the Jarama Valley. Their orders: keep Franco from choking off the last open road, the lifeline to Madrid. They were short on training, short on weapons. Mel Anderson, a former steelworker, had just arrived in Spain.
I didn't have any training. We stopped on the way up to the front and got to fire 5 shots into the hillside. That was our military training. And then we were loaded back on the trucks and on up to the front.
They may have been ill-trained and ill-equipped, but they had spirit and they could sing.
Oh, the Lincoln Battalion by cracky, a bunch of brave bozos so wacky. They held down the line for months at a time against Franco, he'll do his lackey. Yippee-yi-yi-yi. There is a sweet cookhouse not far away, where we get sweet demo 3 times a day. When you're down the fire, ye Franco se va paseo, ye Franco se va paseo.
At Jarama, 550 Americans fought from and lived in trenches with the other international brigades. A major assault was ordered on February 27th. It was as ill-conceived, badly led, quixotic, and heroic as the charge of the Light Brigade in the Crimean War. These guys didn't even have horses. John Tisa, a former factory worker and writer, was in the front lines.
That day, we were promised firepower on the left and on the right, a tank and artillery support. And when we went over, there was nothing there on the left or right, from the air, from the rear. And the machine gun crossfire from those positions that were looking down upon us from the fascist side was so murderous that no matter where you moved or how you moved, bullets kept hitting the ground, smashing into it and smashing into, in my case, it hit my rifle right in my hand and broke it in half. I had no rifle. I had no helmet.
The fire was absolutely withering. And I got out, maybe within about 100 yards of the fascist position, and I got hit in the leg and went down. So I started firing, so every time I got shot in the arm, and that didn't hurt too much, so I had fire again, they shot me again, and I decided to be good. I didn't shoot anymore.
The Americans and their allies from the other international brigades won the Battle of Jarama. The last road to Madrid was kept open. But on one awful day, February 27th, 127 Americans were killed, 250 wounded in the Valley of Death.
There was never enough rifles, never enough tanks, never enough artillery or anti-aircraft weapons to face the abundant materiel sent by Hitler and Mussolini. And I need to sing a song to it. The Valley of Jarama, a valley we all knew too well. This is where we wasted our manhood and most of our old age as well.
There's a valley in Spain called Jarama. It's a place that we all know so well. It was there that we gave of our manhood, where so many of our brave comrades fell.
We didn't know it at the time, but we attacked practically an impregnable position without tanks, without planes. If we had not had a Neutrality Act and an embargo here, we would have won that son of a bitch of a war.
They won at Jarama that spring. Then on the Monday afternoon of April 26th, Spring died. The planes were Hitler's. The object was Terra, the target, an historic Basque town, Guernica. Bombs killed more than 1,000 of the 7,000 people, destroyed more than 3/4 of the buildings. And if art can speak, one painting screamed. Guernica. Picasso's powerful outcry against war. And yet, these crayon drawings strike just as deep. They were made by Spain's children, caught in the war between wars. Children. The natural victims of all war. Thousands, hundreds of thousands were evacuated. Many never found their way home to Spain.
They paid an enormous price, and the glory, and that's the best word I can choose, that was the Spanish people at that time, still shines for me. And their defeat, that enormous tragedy, a tragedy for all of us, still is an active wound in my heart.
And what began as a civil war over something called ideas ended as a brutal sideshow and a preview of coming attractions.
Picasso's Guernica. It expands the devastation of a city into a cry of anguish at the horror of all war. It's a huge thing. The real one is 11.5 feet by 25.5 feet. And Picasso painted it right after the bombing in about a month. One angry, boiling month. Come back to our world for some of the other legacies from a long winter and short spring of 1937.
Our World will be right back.
Give a little nibble, give a little nibble.
Wendy's asks, before you eat your next hamburger, any hamburger, taste the meat.
Give a little nibble.
Is it dry and chewy, or hot and juicy? Is it bland, or is it tasty?
Give a little nibble.
No other hamburger has Wendy's hot and juicy taste. The more you nibble others, the more you'll love Wendy's.
Father's son, daughter's friend, the dreams of a nation you fought to defend.
Over the last 2 years, your donations to the Coors Veterans Memorial Scholarship Fund have helped over 1,000 sons and daughters of American veterans go to college. Look for the Coors Memorial Day display. More dreams are waiting.
And though time has passed, it's clear to see we remember.
The USS Liberty, blown out of the water 20 years ago like the USS Stark. The survivors relive their horror.
They died in an instant.
Watch 2020.
Tonight.
Welcome back to the long winter and short spring of 1937. Where did those dark Depression winters of the 30s lead? Straight to World War. Spring, as it turned out, would be a little late that decade. But in 1937, we didn't know that's what would happen. Here's more about what we didn't know would happen.
It took World War II to cure the Great Depression, but Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal had healed the wounds, bound them up with public works. The Federal Writers Project gave us Saul Bellow and John Cheever and Richard Wright. The Art Project nourished Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning and Ben Shahn. The photographer's work lives on. And so do the homeless, less visible now because they are poor in the midst of plenty and very much alone.
The big bands survived the Depression. Benny Goodman's even survived rock and roll. Lionel Hampton, he still plays with a band, only now it's called the Lionel Hampton Band.
Have you heard who the new patron saint of Ethiopia is? Karen Carpenter.
Shock Radio, today's version of Amateur Hour.
The success in Flint led to a nationwide wave of sit-down strikes until the sit-down was outlawed in 1939. Today, foreign competition has hurt American car makers. This month, at one of the plants in Flint that was struck 50 years ago, more than 3,000 workers will lose their jobs. Nowadays, robots can work the assembly lines 24 hours a day, and they don't need a union.
When the American Abraham Lincoln Brigade came home from the Spanish Civil War, nearly half of them stayed behind, buried in Spanish soil. And Franco, with the help of his allies, Franco won. In June of '39, Hitler decorated his Condor Legion for what they did to Spain. By that fall, Hitler was in Poland. By the next spring, Paris. 50 years later, the veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade celebrated their reunion in a democratic Spain.
Well, there it is the way it was in the early part of 1937, when I had my 7th birthday. My recollections of 50 years ago are suspect, just beyond the threshold of real memory. But they're there, bred in the bone. They are why I'm a Union man. They're why I cry whenever I see the Grapes of Wrath, and why I'd rather hear Benny Goodman play the clarinet than hear a nightingale sing, and why I'll remember Joe Louis after I've forgotten Muhammad Ali. You can take a man out of his childhood, but you can't take his childhood out of a man.
A famous American writer who was 37 in 1937 went to Spain for its Civil War and wrote that American fighting men fought as well as American fighting men fought anywhere. He wrote a lot of other stuff about bravery, but he's not one of my heroes. I favor a fellow who went to California in 1937. He was 24 years old. He never carried a press pass. He did own a weapon once, and on it was written, "This machine kills fascists." And sometimes over the years, when he sat with migratory workers in the labor camps, or walked with union workers on the picket line, or stood with the out of work on the bread line, he would take out his weapon and strum it and sing these words, which were his words. "This land was made for you and me. Comes the next long winter, you keep Ernest Hemingway. I'll take Woody Guthrie every time." And so it goes. Also in the long winter and short spring of 1937,
in Duck Hill, Mississippi, 2 black men accused of murder were kidnapped and blowtorched by a mob of 200 whites. One of the blacks was then burned to death, the other shot to death.
one of the bestsellers that season.